6. So I woke up this morning, went for a little walk in Rotenburg just because I didn't take too many pictures, so I figured I'd go in the morning. I was pretty tired because we stay up pretty late for the game. But I did wander around a little bit. It was still kind of sprinkling. So we had our breakfast, and then it was time to get on the road. Our first stop was Dachau, and of course this is a concentration camp memorial area. And going in, I thought that it would be very emotional. I thought that I might find myself kind of losing it a little bit, but rather than feeling the emotion from it, I really kind of felt more of the knowledge and the understanding of how this camp worked. I mean, there was definite tragedy and many died, but I guess when a lot of times we think of concentration camps, we think of Auschwitz, where it was an extermination camp. But this camp's purpose was to be a reform or a work camp. This camp was the longest running for 12 years, and so it's changed and evolved quite a bit from when it began. It began as an education or a re-education camp where they would send these individuals that were against the Nazi Party, and they would force them into believing the beliefs of the Nazis. So this could be, a certain priest or, journalists, people that would speak out against the party. Later in the war, it became, it was still a work camp, but it became, the population was much different. That was where you got the Jews and the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Gypsies or the Roma. Now, after the war, the camp was used as a refugee place, so the camp itself is not completely maintained the way it used to look, but they have done things to help you envision what it was like. For example, the barracks, they've all been torn down, but they recreated 2, and then they put foundations in the spots of where the other ones would be at, so you can get an idea of the location and how it was set up and what it would have looked like. And so we had a little bit of a guided tour, and probably about an hour, and we got to learn a little bit more that way, and then we had our own free time. The tour was from England, and the guide was great. One of the things that really struck me was one of the memorials. It was this piece of artwork of these people jumping into an electric fence, and he talked about how some people would do that just because they knew that they could end it that way. So he kind of guided us around and explained some of the things. After we were done with the tour, we had free time, and I made my way to the crematorium first. And this was really interesting to see where they would actually burn the bodies. Now, the people that died here died from overexertion or from starvation. They were, for the most part, not killed just because of the sake of killing. And so, when in this crematorium, they really are kind of like, they kind of look like pizza ovens in a way, where you would, have your fire and then you push the food in. So they've got kind of these gurneys in a way that they could put 2 or 3 bodies on and then put them under the fire and then, of course, burn the bodies. And each of the rooms has a different purpose. You see the room where they would actually store the dead bodies before they were put in the crematorium. And later on, when I was walking through the museum, it said that when it was liberated, they found many bodies in this room waiting to be cremated. In the crematorium, there's also a gas chamber, but the gas chamber was never actually used, at least not the way we would think of. They did experiments in there, but apparently every concentration camp had to have the same things, and so just in case there was a major issue where they needed to kill in the mass. So we did get to see that. Even though it wasn't used, it was still really interesting to see, because you've got the room where they take them in and they say, okay, you're going to take a shower. Then you've got the room where they hang up the clothes. Then you've got the actual gas chambers. And then you've got the disinfecting room where they would disinfect the clothes. And so that was really interesting to see, and I can imagine how scary that would be to go in there. After I was done at the crematorium, I walked up through the barracks, and you actually get to go in them, and it's nice they have the barracks set up so that you can see how they've changed over the time. It starts out very spacious, plenty of room, and then it gets smaller, and then by the end it's very small. It's really just one giant bunk bed put together. There's not actually any space, so you'd have to crawl to your spot. Now, the barracks there were meant for 50 people, but he said that over 400 could be put in there at a time when it was overcrowded. And I try to imagine that. I think of all of my 8th graders being stuffed in there and having to sleep. And they said that, you know, people would be sleeping on top of other people and you couldn't get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, otherwise you'd lose your spot. From there, I went into the museum. I did buy a couple postcards in the gift shop before I did that. But the museum was very well set up. It was in English and in German. And I found myself wanting to actually read everything, even though I normally just kind of skim, but there were so many quotes and the visuals to go along with it, and the stories were just very interesting. But unfortunately we were running out of time and I hadn't had lunch yet, so I needed to save some time. Once I got to lunch, I realized that they had a book that had all the information from the exhibit, so I ran back to get that. So it's kind of nice because now I can go back to that and read through that. But it's amazing what they did at this camp. The medical experiments, how they created embolisms just to see the reaction. They tested many things with malaria, with change in air pressure. I mean, really, it's forms of human torture. And then my final stop before lunch was in the bunker. And so this is where the punishment, the medical testing, and kind of the prison was. There was one section where they had cells that were 2 by 4. And so I think it was 2 feet by 4 feet or something like that. But basically it was small enough so you couldn't sit down or lay down. You could only stand up, and you could be in there for 72 hours. And so I figured that would be my perfect torture because I couldn't be able to handle it. I get cramped when I have to sit down on the plane. I can't lay down, let alone if I was stuck there for 72 hours and couldn't sit down either. So that's mostly what I saw when I was there. Something that really kind of caught me when our tour guide was speaking to us was he said that when people came in and, you know, they're starting to dehumanize them by cutting their hair and things like that, and we did get to see those rooms, that the soldiers would tell the prisoners or the people in the concentration camp that you're worthless, you're nothing, you're a piece of shit. And that'd be pretty rough, I think, knowing what you're going into and just being dehumanized like that. I asked our guide how many soldiers would be on duty, and he said not very many. And something I couldn't understand is at one point there was 40,000 people in this concentration camp. Why couldn't they just rebel against these soldiers? There's so few of them, but they're so worn out.
Well, we're about